Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and, well, the master manipulator itself, the Federal Reserve, which is in desperate times itself, just threw a whole bunch of money into the markets, and go figure, that's basically what the Fed is best at, is creating a bunch of fake currency out of thin air, taxing us to death, and then, extorting us for the vast amounts of debts that are being created utilizing these massive banks that are in themselves bankrupt. And now, we see a bit of a turn for the worst in the stock market, and the Fed's like, you know what, we'll just make that, we'll paint a bush there. It's like the Bob Ross of the markets. We'll paint a little bush there and all is going to be fine. Let's get into this article from Markets Insider, which says the Fed pumps another $75 billion into markets. Its third straight daily injection. And as the article goes into, the Federal Reserve jumped into financial markets for a third straight day on Thursday in another attempt to keep interest rates from moving higher. The New York Federal Reserve said late Wednesday that it would inject another $75 billion into the market on Thursday to keep the federal funds rate within its target range. Short-term rates had earlier this week shot up as high as 10%, threatening to disrupt the bond market and the overall lending system. The latest overnight repurchase agreement, or repo, came a day after the policy-setting Federal Open Market Committee cut its benchmark interest rate to a target range of 1.75% to 2%. In two separate market operations on Tuesday and Wednesday, the central bank offered a total of $128 billion through repos. This week marked the first time the central bank has taken such steps since the global financial crisis 10 years ago. We hear that brought up a lot in comparison with what we've been witnessing lately within the economy. But carrying on, it says there remained debate about the exact reason the amount of cash that banks have on hand for short-term funding needs dried up earlier this week. But the shortage came after businesses had to pay quarterly tax bills at the same time that the Treasury issued billions in new bonds. Fed Chairman Jay Powell said on Wednesday that the repo operations were temporary and that rates were expected to return to the target range. And I quote, "Funding pressures in money markets were elevated this week, and the effective federal fund rate rose above the top of its target range," he told reporters at a press conference following the interest rate announcement. While these issues are important for market functioning and market participants, they have no implications for the economy or the stance of the monetary policy. So, John, let's get into this a bit. It's hard to not, find this kind of just comical after a while. I mean, we've seen what's been happening with share buybacks. We've seen the Fed plunge protection team. We've seen the $0 trading desk. We see these banks that are bankrupt. We see the everything bubble. We see interest rates at the Fed going very, very low, and Trump calling for negative interest rates. And then we see this. What does this story tell you about the state of the economy currently and where this is going?
Well, I guess they're kind of struggling, Josh, and what we see from December, if I remember right, and if you can look it up on YouTube, I think a certain guy called Steve Mnuchin had a phone call with 7 of the top bankers in the United States, and then he came out and said that, there's no liquidity crisis. Was there back in December? That's the question, of course. And now we saw that there is a liquidity crisis. And of course, with all this tax bill, all the taxes needing to get paid, and the Fed, issuing a whole bunch of new bonds, because they actually going to have to issue a lot more. Like the current official deficit is about a trillion .010 that the United States government has, and they got to continue to issue a whole bunch of bonds. And who will buy these bonds? And just recently, actually, me and Tim have covered this on the channel here a couple of weeks ago, where we were talking about the Fed has actually resumed purchasing the actual. I don't know exactly what they bought on their balance sheet. I got to go in and look, but they bought about, since the bottom in August 28th. They bought almost $10 billion worth of assets that they put on their balance sheet. So I don't know exactly what this increase is all about, and what is going on there over at the Fed, but it seems like they may be maybe they are, something is going on there, or is it just the gold that they have, in asterisks, of course, that increased in value because of the gold spike, because of global recession fears. And of course, the OECD just came out today and said that there's a bigger global slowdown in the world economy, and that's what. Of course, I listened to Jerome Powell during his speech yesterday. He was talking about how the only things that could put any sticks in the wheels for the Fed, everything was fine otherwise, was either the trade problem with tariffs, or it could be a global slowdown, which of course has been documented now for a while, where all countries around the world has been lowering interest rates. Almost everybody, not everyone, of course. And a stupid central bank in Norway is doing the total opposite of everybody else. When they have a bubble, creating kind of a problem in Norway, everybody's shrieking about actual rate increase.
But John, I mean, I would have to add that the Federal Reserve's biggest enemy is none other than itself, after all. I mean, and we hear Jay Powell raising the concern, and I think he's blaming the wrong participants. What about the people that are creating the problem in the first place, that Hegelian dialectic?
Oh, yeah. But of course, Josh, that's exactly what it is. It's the Fed itself that's the problem here. But of course, they want to try to blame the Trump, yelling around. Actually, I saw it was really funny. There was an article that just came out talking about, I think it was one of his economic advisors saying that we should put 100% tariffs on China. And that just, you got to laugh about that. But that's the insanity that you have on that side. But
well, if you want to see how terrible his economic advisors truly are, just look at my interview with Stephen Moore from last July. This is one of the top advisors to the president over time, and was one of the top contenders to replace Jay Powell at the Federal Reserve. And the guy is just stumped if you ask him like the simplest question about the economy or the markets. Like, hey, he's like, employment is great. Well, what about the labor force participation rate? You got a point there. I mean, these are the people that are advising the president. And again, the president has very little say overall in how this all turns out in the end. The Federal Reserve is that master manipulator that we talked about with the whips and all.
Well, yeah, what we got to understand is that there are a bunch of academics sitting over there that have about 90 years of education that they look at. They don't look past, and look at, the French assignat or all the way back, 1600. You have the palm struck, privately printed currency in Sweden that collapsed. They don't look at any of those really old ones because they think that's a thing of the past and things have changed now. You can just print money out of thin air and things are fine. That's what they believe in. And if you listen to Jerome Powell's speech, he actually said that nothing is bad now, like everything is fine. But if something happens, we're willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that the economy is fine at the other side. So basically, he said that they're gonna print themselves into oblivion to avert the catastrophe that they see, which is the deflationary pressures now that you got all this debt saturation into the markets. Everybody's indebted up to their teeth. Not too much in the United States, but everywhere else in the world is just crazy how much debt everybody has. And this debt is going to come collapsing down at one point when you can't add more people.
Well, you say it's not so bad in the States, and you're right compared to other people, but it's still really bad in the States, so that says a lot.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's comparable to what, right? So yeah, exactly. No, it's the whole world is kind of at a starting to get to a standstill, and you kind of seen that in the overnight money markets, the repo market that you saw with the interest rates. They jumped from about sitting at 2.5, between 2.25 to 2.5%. Then they jumped on the 16th. They jumped to 3.5 to 4.6, and then they were all the way up at 70. On the 17th, they were from 5.85 till 9. And then, of course, now it's stabilizing again because the Fed, everything is fine. They actually, what you got to understand is, I just got to tell you, it's 3 till 5 right now as of yesterday, but I don't know, I don't have the numbers up to date because it hasn't closed yet and they haven't announced them yet. But what we got to understand is these guys over at the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Treasury, all they understand is the money printing mechanism, and if they get deflation, they're gonna panic. They're gonna severely panic, and they, I was just listening actually to a 10-year anniversary thing of the financial crash, they actually had one on. I think it was HBO that put one on, and they interviewed, all the big guns, Jamie Dimon, Ben Bernanke, Timothy Geithner, Hank Paulson, all the criminals that was over at the Fed when they did the TARP bailout. But when they did the TARP bailout, they did it. It was 400 and I think 26. They actually got that back. They're saying, but they did a 420 something bailout. Well, that bailout in just 3 days now, just 3 days, we got to remember how bad they printed money now, was 200 billion. That was half of what they did over a couple of years during the financial crisis. So what we've seen, and if you look at all the money printing going on around the world, like look at the balance sheets of the banks from 2008 to 2018, they averaged 333% increase in the size of the central bank's balance sheet of the 72 biggest central banks that I looked at. So what you're seeing is this massive increase in asset buying, and now they're getting back on the train. The ECB announced that they're gonna start buying, I believe it was 20 billion euros worth of bonds again, because they're in serious trouble over there in Europe. They're in negative interest rates. Germany, all of the bonds from 1 month to 30 years are negative now in Germany, and banks in all across Europe now is in negative territory. You got 22% of mortgages in Denmark being in negative territory. That's insane, Josh. They're actually paying the people to take out a mortgage. So literally, like the interest, instead of having to pay that, well, now you're actually paying. The bank is paying you back to take a loan. That's a default. That's a blatant default.
That sounds very familiar, and we're kind of going through that phase that we've seen all too many times before, but obviously this is a much greater global issue. So I wanted to kind of get into that quickly, just talking about, the derivatives bubble worldwide, multi-quadrillion dollar level. We have the everything bubble, housing bubbles, pension bubbles, student loan bubbles, auto bubbles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And on top of that, you've got the currency bubble. I mean, there's a massive currency reset on the horizon, and, we see people reacting to a lot of this news, getting into gold, getting into silver, getting into cryptocurrency as well. And you look at a lot of these countries like Australia and Britain and just Europe in general as well. I mean, the ECB is lowering interest rates, Britain's lowering interest rates, Australia is lowering interest rates. There's all this division around the world. Italy just overthrew one of their leaders. I mean, I was just there the moment after I left. Out goes their leader. And I mean, like, if this is happening everywhere. I was in Athens. There's homelessness everywhere. There's Molotov cocktails flying everywhere. It's a horrible place to actually visit nowadays. And you go back to the United States. I was just in Philadelphia. Massive homelessness everywhere. And, LA, New York, etc. Everywhere you go. And of course, up in Canada as well. And it's just getting to this point where it's like, how long until this thing just cannot hold out anymore? Because you see the desperation of the Fed and the desperation of the ECB and the Bank of England, etc., and just desperately trying to bring interest rates down. And they're like, oh, we're entering into a crisis and we're bringing interest rates down at the same time. This is probably not going to go well. And then Trump's like, well, negative interest rates, we think that will be great and, helpful to our economy. And it's like, anyone that's studied even the most basic form of economics looks at this and goes, wow, this is probably not going to end well for any of us. So on a global scale, John, as we're seeing this recent news out of the Fed and them trying to prop up markets as they do best and worst long term, I guess you could say, how is this going to affect the global monetary system and the global markets overall?
Well, clearly there's a serious issue in central banking worldwide, and what we're seeing is a distrust in the system that's starting to develop because people are seeing this mass inequality, as we were talking about. And the reason for that inequality is these central bankers printing mass amounts of money, and of course their buddies at Wall Street have been sitting there at the one end, collecting from even negative interest rates, being able to get a mass amounts of debt, and stupid pension funds are buying them. And then what you're seeing is, on the other hand, you have the ultra poor living on credit cards that are 19.9 or 24%. So you have a clear interest rate apartheid on top of this money printing, which is making it very hard for anybody to actually be able to function in the economy and have real equality. See, this is the thing where all these lefties are getting completely wrong and don't understand anything about modern economics. is the only reason why we have such a wide array of inequality is because of the currency printing. And now we have this modern monetary theorist like what's her name, Ocasio-Cortez and others coming out and saying that we should print more money on top of that. That's not going to fix it. I had a person, MMT person, come on my comment on my The Economic Truth page that I have, and she said that, MMT will fix everything. I sent this to Krugman and to everybody else, and they will soon understand that this is the way to go. It's like these guys are complete morons. They have zero lack of understanding of historical monetary policies and how.
Wait, John,
money
are you
works.
saying that Ocasio-Cortez shouldn't do what Obama had expressed all that time by creating a $1 trillion coin to pay off a bunch of the debt?
Well, they should create a $10 quadrillion coin now, because that's what they will need soon with pushing forward all this debt and just to talk about the inequality that's there and just in the United States, and where the biggest amount of inequality happens is in the bigger cities, because that's where all the money floods to, right? Because that's where you get the biggest inflation. Look at this article from Market Watch, which says that nearly half of the U.S. population as poor, that lives in poverty, actually lives in California. So you're seeing in these city centers, that's where you're going to have the highest inflation. The asset inflation, of course, in real estate is massive in a lot of these, especially in California, in the United States. That's where the biggest bubbles are. You're seeing those inflation points happening in the economy there, where you have lesser inflation on the countryside, where people are just living. And actually, what's interesting about the countryside, people are tending to forget about the flyover states in the United States, where most of the food gets produced that everybody needs to survive. They seem to forget about that, and it seems to be like a historical cycle that is happening, where people tend to forget the real economics. We financialize the whole world. You make money with money, but nobody understands that we actually need food, water, shelter to survive. And these farmers, I live here in Manitoba, and you lived there for many years too, Josh. This is the breadbasket of North America, together with Saskatchewan and some parts of Alberta. And you're seeing the farmers are getting older and older. They're shutting down a lot of them, and some are not even being able to forward the land to someone. And at that point in history, we've seen this with other civilizations, because I know we talk a lot about old civilizations. A lot of the times, they happen is where they go and get into these big civilizations, and then at one point they forget that they need all this food that they used to be on the agricultural side, and then civilizations start to drop, because when you get to this point, you print all this money, and on top of that, you have a lack of agricultural products that are coming out in output, and you have garbage food coming out.
Yeah,
right.
I mean,
because of the monetary system.
One thing I've definitely learned through my research in ancient civilizations is there's two things that end a civilization. There's nature, and that would be mass cataclysms, asteroids, comets, floods, etc. And number two, people who think that they are God and continuously manipulate their system and build up their system as if that they are a God, and they can just create everything out of thin air and manifest everything. Really? And eventually they get so arrogant that they build up that tower to the top, to the stars, thinking that they will reach the heavens, and it comes tumbling down on top of them, and it happens every single time. And also in my research on ancient Rome, when I went to Rome recently, it was just unbelievable the similarities between ancient Rome and today's United States, which is why on our channel, if you go to our main channel, we have a video on the similarities between Rome, the fall of empires, I think it's called, on our channel, just breaking down the difference or the similarities between the rise and the fall of both empires. And they are empires. They both started as republics. They both end as empires, and that's what we've become, and that's what we see today.
Yeah, with the currency printing, it was debasement of currency by the Romans, and it was debasement of currency by the Americans, but then they printed pure fiat because that was invented by the Chinese. And you saw that same with the Chinese empires, the Song Dynasty, the Qin Dynasty, the Southern Song Dynasty, the Tang and the Yuan dynasties. All of them fell because they believed that they could just print all of this credit and create all of this value. But then by creating all this, they forgot supply and demand. That's just a natural kind of way that the world works is when you have an oversupply of things. Things are great, but then you get a lack of supply, and things becomes really bad. And what really happened is there's just an expansion of credit together with the expansion of being able to get all this oil out of the ground. That just created a massive population boom, and everybody is rich in a lot of countries now because everybody has a house, everybody has such a great living standard. But what we're forgetting here is that at one point, because we're charging interest on top of that new debt that's coming in, that's creating all this new wealth, at one point, there's not going to be any more people because we're demographically in countries like Canada, Germany, actually most of Europe, and in the United States as well. You're seeing the demographics. The big baby boomer generation is starting to sell off assets, and they're not a growth anymore in the populations there. So that's why I also see the big push for immigration that Canada has to try to save this Ponzi scheme that they've built, because they need more indebtedners to pay off that ever increasing interest that they can't pay down. So we're just going to have this constant printing of currency, and it's not going to end well by any means. And they believe that they could just keep on printing. Yeah, you could keep on printing, but at one point the population would say that, well, this currency isn't buying me anymore. Look at the Gilets jaunes in France. That's exactly what happened there. Is it was a tax, or it was basically their purchasing power was so diminished that a tax that they wanted to have on gas really just basically tumbled the economy. Now, of course, I think they had $25 billion that they gave to people now in order to try to appease them, but they still are going the Gilets jaunes movement, because they see, I think a lot of them starting to see what really is wrong, and it's all this currency printing that have destroyed their purchasing power. And when when the trust in the currency disappears, Jaws, that's when the currency fails, and it takes just about a year after that trust is broken, that trust link, and then it's game over for the big nation states. But then, of course, the solutions that we talk about all the time is the cryptocurrencies and have your wealth insurance in gold and silver. Those are going to be and play forefront in this coming fall of the fiat currencies. And what we're going to see is people have wealth insurance with gold and silver, and then having a bank insurance in having crypto on hand, because when the bank starts failing, well, they're going to put in capital controls and limit the amount of money that you can take out.
Of course, and that's what the cashless society is all about. And I mean, that's the centrally planned cashless society. Of course, they're going to be able to control every move, every transaction, everything they do. Exactly. And I have to say, I mean, you mentioned earlier, I mean, what is it going to take? $10 quadrillion coins to, I mean, eventually, if they keep going in the direction they are going, and they will, those 10 quadrillion coins will hardly buy a loaf of bread. But I want to finish this off, John. The solutions you alluded to there, it's food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, and of course gold and silver as wealth insurance, not investment advice, our opinion, but nonetheless, I mean, you look at history, and we're seeing people look at history lately, and people are moving towards that now. Of course, it's hard to shave off slices of gold and put it on a scale to send internationally. So this is another reason why cryptocurrencies are answering a lot of questions that have not been answered as of yet. I mean, I'm watching this market, the decentralization of these cryptocurrencies and the move towards these trustless-based systems. I think that says a lot about where society is moving. I mean, it's just there's always a free market answer to the questions of the servitude that we're all shoved into via vast amounts of debt, printing of currency, government control, etc. So it's really great to see all these options come up. I think there's more solutions than there are problems, and it comes down to individuals really being responsible, most of all, and trying to understand and dissect these problems and apply the right solution. So. John, as we finish this off, can you give everyone a bottom line and your thoughts on this report and where we're going next?
Yeah, the bottom line here is that we need trust, and we need to have a trustless system where we could actually, we don't need to elect a corrupt politician, because people are getting fed with that system. What we need to do is we need to have these blockchains starting to replace society, and we were starting to see people building that, and one of them is a blockchain that I'm working on, which is called UOS. which has created a governance system that you basically can replace the whole voting, everything that you need. Not that I believe in the democracy the way it's built today, but at least you can replace, these corrupt politicians, and you wouldn't need them at all. And the government, you wouldn't need that as well, because now you have a blockchain that will, do maybe one or two things if you wanted the government. So it becomes obsolete, and truth is, the number one thing that I think with all these trustless systems, the truth is there. And I believe when you bring truth to society that blockchains can create, I believe that is going to be the key for the future. And I believe also for the future of peace on this planet, because if you continue to print all this fiat currency, look at their, how much they, are the blood are dripping out of the mouth of the military-industrial complex elites wanting to go to war with Iran, with the constant false flags going on over there. That's, their end game. But I think with blockchain and these solutions of not trusting the government and building, voluntary societies, I believe that is where we will see us as human beings prosper in the future, or else we're going to have, the scenario of what Putin described in an interview with RT, or I think it was a press conference, where he said that the people are asking him, what would you do if somebody sent a nuclear bomb on you? Well, I said that I'll unleash hell on earth. I'll unleash every single nuclear missile that I have in my arsenal and bomb the fuck out of the earth. Sorry for the bad language, but that's what we're gonna have here if we don't do nothing and don't replace these corrupt, the corrupt monetary system that corrupts the government, that corrupts everything, and destroys societies, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one way or another, the blockchain is being developed, and it's up to us whether we want to sit back scared and allow the government to, build on it, or if we want to take action as free individuals and build it. Because one way or another, it is going to take over. It's just, will it take over in the sense where government is going to enslave humanity, or which it already really is, but to a greater scale,
or will
it take over? Yeah, through will it take over via the hand of individual demand in the markets and replacing the government, replacing these monetary systems, and creating a system of complete voluntary interactions? I mean, it's up to us, folks. So we know the future is going one way, not the other. We're not going back in time, and it's not going to be all gold and silver. I'm sorry, it's not. I love gold and silver. I actually prefer gold and silver as wealth insurance over cryptocurrency overall. But one way or another, we are watching technology develop, and it's not just going to be a future where we're trading in gold and silver. That's just not how it's going to work. It's 2019. We're heading into 2020. Eventually we're going to be in the 22nd, 23rd century. Look, folks, we're not going back. So we must develop to the best of our ability to make the best of these technologies. And I think we could really free humanity with a lot of them if we actually work towards that, rather 100%. Than resisting the obvious technologies that will take over the next century. Anyway, John, I appreciate you joining us today. There's a lot more to go into. I'm heading to Turkey right away. So wish me luck on that. I'm going to, I know John and Tim and, we're going to see videos coming up over WAM in that time. I don't know how much I'm actually going to be able to post while I'm in Turkey. So stay tuned for lots from Tim and John, of course, as always. Lots of great videos coming from there. Lots of up-to-the-minute news as far as economics goes. I'm going to do my best to bring a few videos up. And all the same, I want all of you guys to join us on float.app. That's flote.app. Good friend of mine, Kingsley Edwards, put this together, and it's an incredible social media that is taking over Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon, as well as we have Subscribestar, where we have subscriber-only content, which we are posting. And of course, we are on Float at Josh Sigurdson at WAM. And John, what's your name on Float?
I actually forgot. Sorry, I think it's called the Economic Truth or something like that.
All right, just look up, something along that line. Anyway, I put him on the spot there, but we got a whole bunch of stuff. We're trying to move away from YouTube and move away from these massive platforms, and we cannot do it without you, because I'm guaranteeing you this: in the next year or two, Wham is going to be gone from YouTube. We're going to be deleted. They're already deleting our videos. They're deleting so many independent medias. They've deleted 17,000 channels just in the last short while, I think 2 weeks. And on top of that, they are just creating new terms of service that calls everything we used to do hate speech, etc., and against community guidelines. So they're striking our channel, taking down videos. It's getting really bad, folks. We've lost 80% of our audience here on YouTube and 90% of the income coming in through YouTube since January alone. So we need you guys in any way possible, shape or form, either just pressing like and sharing our videos, but most notably going to these other platforms, as well as donating, pledging something. You know, we have other options at the end of this video in the outro of the video that we will play for you. But look, we need you guys more than ever if we want to survive as independent media, and we don't want a complete monopoly once again of only mainstream medias online. We need to act now, not later, now. So what I have to say is just $1 a month. That's all it takes. Imagine if even 5% of you did that. It would be over $6,000 a month coming into Wham, and we would be able to completely disregard the attempts to self-censor by YouTube by demonetizing and being financial terrorists. And they are terrorists. Think about it. What makes someone a terrorist? They're using ideology and fear to express their ideology, and they're scaring people out of posting things because they'll lose money. And it's actually controlling the narrative, and it's destroying our ability to free humanity. And we were winning the information war. We're about to lose it if we don't act now. I'm optimistic long term, short term, not so much. So let's get moving, folks. Anyway, there's an outro that explains all the ways that you can help out and keep independent media alive, and I really appreciate anything you guys can do. Anyway, John, thanks for joining us again. We'll be back with you guys with much more. This is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, Wham? Well, we now need you more than ever before, as YouTube comes in and cuts our audience size by about 80% since January 2019 alone, cutting our monetization down by about 90%. We are watching a vast exodus happen of independent media, and it's completely involuntary. They are ripping away our ability to reach you with free information on a daily basis. So this is your time to shine, folks. Just $1 single a month could change everything and be able to save independent media. Imagine if 100% of you, 10% of you, 5% of you gave just $1 single a month. That is what will save us from the vast purge of independent media. Now, you could go and find us on places like GoFundMe, of course, Patreon, Subscribestar, where we do subscriber-only content for all of you, as well as check out our Bitcoin address below, as well as on the screen for you to scan, if you please. Also, check us out on the alternative platforms. We need to start moving over there, folks, before we get deleted, because soon enough, it'll only be Fox News, CNN, CBC, etc., on YouTube. So find us on new social media networks like float.app, that's flote.app, and they are truly replacing Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon, of course, as well, with crypto payments. You can also find us on BitChute as well, and of course, all of these things are linked below in the description, as well as in the comments for ease for you to be able to actually access these links. Please help us out. We really, truly need you guys. And I cannot go without mentioning Anarchapulco 2020, the premier Liberty event in Acapulco, Mexico. You can find it at anarchapulco.com and use promo code WHAM to save 10% on your tickets. We hope to see you there. It's going to be another amazing year. I'm optimistic about the future, guys, but short term, it's not so good. So now is your chance to help save independent media from complete demise. We hope to see you guys soon. Until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.